It was supposed to be a routine farewell, just another royal engagement ending with polite waves and practiced smiles. But that day, something was different. As William and Kate turned to leave, the crowd didn't just cheer. They stood still, holding their breath as if time itself refused to move. Then came the sound, not of applause, but of quiet, heartfelt sobs. A little girl held up a hand-drawn sign, and the look on Kate's face changed everything. In that fleeting moment, captured by hundreds of cameras, the world saw something raw, real, and deeply human behind the royal image. This was the moment that melted millions of hearts. Before we dive into this emotional royal story, make sure to hit that like button if you believe real love still exists, even under the weight of crowns and cameras. Subscribe if you're drawn to stories that reveal the human side of royalty, and share this video with someone who still believes in grace, loyalty, and true emotion behind royal walls. They stood side by side at the edge of the crowd, William and Kate, their silhouettes framed by the golden light of an English afternoon. It was one of those moments that looked ordinary to a stranger but carried a quiet weight to those who knew. The event had been filled with smiles, speeches, and polite laughter. But as the royal couple prepared to leave, something in the air changed. The murmurs softened, cameras lowered. Even the wind seemed to pause. William adjusted his cuff, that familiar, composed gesture that always spoke of discipline. Kate, graceful as ever, glanced at the faces before her. She had seen thousands of crowds before, yet this one felt different. There was emotion in their eyes, as if they too were aware this wasn't just another goodbye. And maybe deep down, the couple knew it too. For weeks, rumors had whispered through the press about a turning point, a new chapter, the weight of the future. Some said it was a symbolic farewell before the next royal duty reshaped everything. Others said it marked a more personal change, as a farewell to the life they once knew. But on that day, nothing was spoken aloud. Only their silence spoke volumes. A young woman near the front of the crowd reached out, clutching a small Union Jack. Her hand trembled slightly. "Kate," she called softly, not the kind of shout that demands attention, but one that hopes to be heard. Kate turned. Their eyes met for the briefest second, and in that second, the crowd disappeared. It was just one woman and one duchess, both mothers, both human, both aware of the fragility of moments like these. Kate's smile softened, not the one the press had perfected, but the quiet one, the one that told of gratitude, of empathy. She mouthed something, words lost in the wind, but the woman understood. "Thank you." Nearby, William leaned down to shake the hand of an elderly veteran. His medals glimmered in the fading light. "You've done your country proud, sir," the veteran said, voice cracking. William smiled, not the polished royal smile, but the one that reminded everyone of the young boy who once followed his mother through crowds just like this one. He squeezed the man's hand a little tighter than usual. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was memory, but in that grip was a story of loss, of duty, of promises kept. And then, just before stepping into the car, William turned one last time. Kate's hand brushed his arm lightly, grounding him. Together they looked out over the crowd. Hundreds of faces, some smiling, some tearful, some just silent. You could feel the emotion ripple through the air like a heartbeat. The cameras captured every detail. The way Kate's hair danced in the soft wind, the way William's jaw tightened slightly as though holding back something he couldn't quite express. But what the cameras couldn't capture was what everyone there felt. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was something deeper. The awareness that this was one of those rare royal moments where everything, titles, protocols, rehearsed gestures, fell away. What remained was human connection. That's what made it beautiful. That's what made it unforgettable. As their car door opened, a little girl in the front row, no older than 7, held up a small handmade sign. It was crayon-drawn, uneven, childlike. It read, "We'll miss you, Princess Kate." Kate saw it just as she turned. She stopped, completely still. Her hand already raised in a farewell wave lowered slightly. Her eyes softened. Then, slowly, she walked over. The crowd gasped, a murmur of disbelief spreading like a gentle tide. Royals rarely broke formation during departures. Yet here she was, stepping off script. She crouched beside the little girl, smiling tenderly. "Did you make that for me?" she asked softly. The girl nodded, eyes wide. Kate reached out, touching the paper lightly, as though afraid to smudge the colors. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you for this." The cameras clicked furiously, but in that moment, no one cared about the headlines. It wasn't for the cameras. It was for that little girl, and for everyone watching who had ever believed that kindness could still exist in a world of protocol and distance. William stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. A gentle smile curved on his lips, proud, protective, knowing. When Kate stood back up, she gave the girl a small wave. The girl waved back, her sign flapping in the wind like a flag of hope. Then came the final moment, the wave. William and Kate turned to face the sea of people. Together they lifted their hands, not as royalty above a crowd, but as two people saying goodbye to those who had always stood by them. The crowd erupted, but not in noise. Instead, there was this strange, trembling quiet. Tears glistened. A few soft sobs carried through the air. People weren't just watching, they were feeling. And then, as the car pulled away, something extraordinary happened. The crowd didn't move. They didn't cheer or clap. They simply stood there and still waving, even after the car had turned the corner and disappeared. That's when the first few words began to spread through social media. "Did you see that?" she cried. They waved back one more time. By evening, that short clip, only a few seconds long, was everywhere. Millions had watched. Millions had felt it. It was called the goodbye that melted Britain. But for William and Kate, it was never about theatrics. It was about presence, that rare, quiet magic that happens when hearts recognize hearts. As the car disappeared down the long drive, Kate glanced at William. "They really do care," she said softly. William nodded. "And so do we." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the crowd lingered faintly behind them, not in their ears but in their hearts. Because sometimes the most powerful goodbyes aren't shouted, they're felt.
It started with silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that falls when 1,000 hearts are holding the same breath. The moment William and Kate's car disappeared beyond the gates, the crowd didn't scatter. No one rushed for the buses or trains. They just stood there, as if leaving would break the spell. A soft murmur spread through the air, like the first drops of rain before a storm. But this wasn't gossip. It was something gentler, reverent, almost sacred. "Did you see how she stopped for that little girl?" a woman whispered, clutching her handbag to her chest. Her voice trembled, not from sadness. "Oh, I've been to dozens of royal events, never seen that before." Beside her, an older man, silver-haired, in a worn military jacket, nodded slowly. "It was like watching Diana again," he said quietly. "That same warmth, that same look in her eyes." And there was the unspoken connection that ran through everyone in that crowd. Diana's memory lingered like sunlight through the clouds. For a moment, it felt like time had looped back, the mother's compassion reborn in her son's wife. A teenager nearby had tears on her cheeks, smudging her mascara. She laughed softly to her friend. "I don't even know why I'm crying," she said, wiping her face. They look so real." Her friend nodded, filming the lingering crowd on her phone. "You can't fake that," she whispered. "That wasn't for cameras." In the background, a street performer, who had played soft violin tunes during the arrival, began playing again. The melody drifted through the air like a farewell hymn. People stopped to listen. Some hummed along. It wasn't an organized concert, yet it felt like a symphony of emotion. Every sigh, every tear, every faint smile forming part of the song. Farther back, a mother held her young son close. He had been fidgeting all afternoon, but now he was quiet, eyes still fixed on the spot where the royal car had disappeared. "Mom," he asked softly, "why were they so sad?" She looked down at him, unsure how to explain something that wasn't sadness exactly. "They weren't sad, love," she said finally. "Sometimes, when you care about people, even goodbyes can make you cry." The boy nodded slowly, as if storing that truth somewhere deep in his little heart. At the edge of the park, a group of photographers huddled together, reviewing their shots. They were professionals, used to flashes, angles, and deadlines. But that day, even they felt something unusual. "Look at this one," a woman said, showing her screen. It was the photo of Kate kneeling beside the little girl. No filters, no edits, just pure emotion. Her colleague leaned closer. "That's not a PR moment," he murmured. "That's a human one." For once, no one argued over the best headline. They just looked at the image, silent, realizing they had captured something rare. Sincerity in a world that too often performs it. By evening, the whispers of the crowd turned into stories online. Tweets, posts, hashtags. The way William looked at her, that's love. Kate bending down to comfort that child, that's the Diana spirit. For once, it wasn't about royalty. It was about being human. Within hours, clips of the farewell were flooding every social platform. But among all the filters, edits, and reactions, one video rose above them all. Shot by a teacher named Hannah, who had stood near the center barrier. Her shaky phone recording showed Kate's quiet smile, the girl's hand-drawn sign, and the final wave as the car turned the corner. The caption was simple. "Sometimes the kindest moments are the ones we never expect." By midnight, it had over 5 million views. But beyond the numbers, something else was happening. People began sharing their own stories. Stories of moments when kindness caught them off guard, when grace changed a day, when compassion felt royal in its own way. In Manchester, a nurse wrote, "After watching Kate with that child, I held my patient's hand longer tonight, because sometimes a small gesture means everything." In Scotland, a father commented, "My daughter made me watch that video 3 times. She said, 'Daddy, that's what love looks like.' And she was right." It was no longer just about a royal farewell. It had become a reflection, a mirror of what humanity craved. Warmth in a world that often forgets it. Back in Windsor, a florist who had decorated the event sat alone in her small shop, watching the news replay. When she saw Kate's eyes fill with emotion, she pressed a hand to her chest. "You can't stage that," she murmured. "That's real heart." She went to her window and saw a small crowd outside, strangers leaving bouquets beneath a photo someone had taped to glass. William and Kate waving one last time. It wasn't a memorial. It was gratitude, quiet, simple, sincere. And yet, beneath all the admiration and love, there was also an undertone, a question that lingered in every conversation. Why did it feel like goodbye? No one had said it out loud, but people sensed it. That subtle heaviness in the air, that tender pause in their wave. It was as if something larger loomed ahead, a change, a new chapter, a shift in the royal rhythm. Could it be another move, a change in title, or perhaps, simply, the quiet awareness that life moves faster than anyone wishes it would? The nation didn't know, but they felt it. That's the strange power of moments like these. They speak in feelings long before facts catch up. That night, when news anchors replayed the clip, they didn't need commentary. The footage spoke for itself. The anchor simply said, "A farewell that reminded Britain what grace looks like." In homes across the country, families watched together. Parents with children, grandparents with tears in their eyes. For a few minutes, everyone felt the same thing. That's what made it royal. Not the crowns, not the ceremony, but the unity of emotion. As one tweet perfectly put it, maybe it wasn't just a goodbye. Maybe it was a reminder that even in a world divided, kindness still unites. And that's exactly what the whispers in the crowd became. A collective heartbeat echoing across Britain and beyond. For those who were there, it felt as if the world exhaled all at once. For those who watched from home, it was a clip that made them freeze mid-scroll, mid-sentence, mid-breath. The moment lasted no more than 10 seconds. Yet somehow, it carried the weight of a lifetime. It began with the wind, a soft, whispering breeze that tugged at the flags and brushed through Kate's hair. She turned slightly, not to pose, not to wave, but almost as if she had heard something. The faint call of a child's voice, or maybe the quiet echo of her own heart. Behind her, William's posture shifted, subtle but telling. His hand brushed her back, the kind of gesture that says everything words can't. You could see it, a silent exchange between two people who didn't need to speak. And then it happened. Kate's eyes locked on the crowd, specifically on that little girl with the hand-drawn sign. The cameras zoomed in. Her lips parted just slightly. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from emotion. She smiled. Not the public smile, but the soft, private one she reserves for family, for friends, for moments that touch her soul. It wasn't just a wave. It was a connection. The crowd felt it before they even realized what they were feeling. A shiver, a kind of emotional hush, rippled through the air. You could almost hear the silence. Thick, trembling, sacred. A mother gasped. A soldier lowered his cap. Even the reporters, always trained to capture the perfect angle, hesitated. It was as though every camera, every eye, every heart recognized that something pure was unfolding. Kate's hand slowly lifted, her eyes glistening, and she waved. A simple wave. Yet it wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how royal the title, how heavy the crown, she would never forget the people behind those barriers. The ones who waved, who waited, who believed. William joined her, standing just slightly behind. His gaze softened, and he gave that same reassuring nod, the one that always told the world, "I've got her. We're in this together." And that's when the air changed. Someone in the crowd began to clap, softly, tentatively. Then another, and another. But before the applause could build, it faded again. Not because people weren't moved, but because they didn't want to break the moment. They just want to stay in it. Back at home, televisions flickered. In cafes, people paused mid-conversation, spoons clinking against porcelain as everyone turned toward the screen. News anchors spoke in lowered tones, almost reverent. "We're seeing a truly moving scene," one whispered. The Duke and Duchess saying farewell in a way that's captured the nation's heart. Social media went silent for a second. That rare pause before the storm. Then came the flood. I'm crying, and I don't even know why. There's something so human in her eyes. That wave fell at the end of an era. It wasn't drama. It wasn't performance. It was sincerity, the kind that cuts through screens and reaches you where you least expect it. The royal press officers had seen countless engagements, polished, choreographed, perfectly timed. But even they felt something they couldn't quite explain. Inside the palace media room, one young aide whispered, "That wasn't in the schedule." Another replied, "No, but maybe it should have been." Because that's what made it unforgettable. It wasn't planned. It was felt. Later that evening, when the footage replayed on the BBC, an expert commentator said something that stuck with millions. We often see the monarchy as an institution of ceremony, but today, what we witnessed was the monarchy as an institution of emotion. And he was right. In those 10 seconds, William and Kate reminded Britain, and perhaps the world, that even among the grandest titles and centuries of tradition, humanity still lives. A slow-motion replay of that moment began trending. It showed Kate's hand midair, her expression soft, her eyes glistening. The clip had no narration, no music, just the ambient sound of wind, camera shutters, and distant murmurs. And yet, people watched it on loop, because in a time of noise and endless headlines, that quiet authenticity felt like medicine for the soul. In the days that followed, talk shows, newspapers, and blogs tried to analyze why that goodbye struck such a chord. Some said it was nostalgia, the echo of Diana's grace. Others said it was a reminder that, despite the palace walls, this was a couple who felt, who cared, who lived through love, loss, and loyalty like everyone else. But one columnist wrote it best. The moment they waved wasn't the end of the visit. It was a bridge between royalty and people, between image and reality, between duty and heart. That clip became more than a viral sensation. It became symbolic. Teachers showed it in classrooms to talk about empathy. News anchors replayed it during quiet moments. Even world leaders in private meetings referenced it, calling it the kind of leadership the world needs. It was as if that single moment reminded everyone what grace looked like: quiet, unspoken, powerful. And while the world replayed it endlessly, William and Kate themselves spent the evening quietly at home with their children. Charlotte, curious as ever, asked, "Mummy, why were people crying when we left?" Kate smiled gently. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people cry when they see something that touches their hearts. And sometimes we do too." Charlotte thought for a moment, then said softly, "Like when you hug us goodbye before school?" Kate laughed softly. "Exactly like that." And somewhere between that conversation and the headlines flashing across the world, the meaning of that day became clear. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about sincerity. Because sometimes a simple wave can stop a nation when it's given with the heart. The next morning, the world woke up to a different kind of headline. No scandals, no speculation, just one line that seemed to echo everywhere. When William and Kate said goodbye, the crowd's reaction melted millions of hearts. And it had. Television screens replayed the wave. Radios described it like poetry. Newspapers called it a royal moment of humanity. But for William and Kate, it wasn't a moment for headlines. It was something personal, something deeply felt. Inside the quiet of their home at Adelaide Cottage, the laughter of their children drifted through the halls. The ordinary sound of family life. Breakfast chatter. Small feet on old floors. Kate, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, looked out across the garden. Beyond the glass, she could still see the faces from the day before, the tears, the smiles, the little girl with the sign. She hadn't stopped thinking about her. William entered the room, casual, sleeves rolled, a trace of tiredness in his eyes, but warmth in his smile. "You're thinking about yesterday," he said softly, not as a question, but as a knowing truth. Kate smiled faintly. "I can't get their faces out of my head," she admitted. All those people, the things they felt. It was more than a farewell. William nodded slowly, standing beside her, watching the same invisible memory. Mum used to say that the hardest part of duty is remembering it's not about being seen, it's about seeing. Kate looked up at him, that same look that had melted hearts the day before. "And you did," she said quietly. "You always do." Across Britain, the aftermath of that moment continued to ripple. A radio caller in Manchester broke down on air as she described it. "It reminded me of when I took my daughter to see Diana, all those years ago. It's like history repeating itself, but softer this time, kinder." In Wales, a school displayed a mural painted by students. Kate bending down to the little girl, William waving beside her. Across the top, in bright paint, the children had written, "Love leads a crown." And in a hospital ward in Liverpool, nurses played the clip for their elderly patients. Some smiled, some cried. One old woman whispered, "That's how you say goodbye with grace." But perhaps the most moving reflection came from the little girl herself, the one whose sign had started it all. Her name was Emily, 7 years old, bright eyes, a bit shy. Her mother later shared their story with a local newspaper. She drew that sign herself. Her mum said, "We didn't expect her to hold it up." She said she wanted to thank the princess for being kind to everyone. And when Kate walked over, Emily didn't say a word. She just smiled. When the journalist asked what Emily remembered most, she said something simple, the kind of thing that makes adults stop and think. "She looked at me like I was the only person there." And that was it. That was the secret. The true power of William and Kate's moment wasn't in grandeur or ceremony. It was in their ability to make thousands feel seen, to remind a nation that compassion, no matter how small, still reigns. Behind palace walls, there's always talk of duty, schedules, and structure. But that day, something softer took the lead. Humanity. A royal insider was quoted saying later, "You could see the emotion in both of them when they got back. They didn't speak about it much, but they didn't need to. It was written all over their faces. They cared deeply, and it shows." And that's what the world saw too. Because true grace doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It shows up in a glance, in a quiet act of kindness, in a farewell that feels like a hug. Weeks later, as autumn painted the trees outside Windsor in gold and crimson, the moment still lived in people's hearts. It wasn't trending anymore, but it didn't need to. It had become something deeper, a memory shared. In homes across Britain, that image, William and Kate waving side by side, found a permanent place on walls, phones, and minds. To some, it was a reminder of love. To others, of leadership. To many, of humanity. And for those who believe in signs, it felt symbolic, a moment of grace in a world that had grown tired of noise. For William and Kate, life continued. Duties resumed, engagements followed, smiles returned. Yet something subtle had changed. During their next public appearance, there was a new kind of warmth between them, not staged, but steady, a quiet understanding that what they represent isn't just royalty. It's resilience, compassion, hope, because sometimes one wave can heal what words never could. Months later, when Kate visited a children's hospital, one nurse whispered to a colleague, "She's even gentler in person." And in that instant, it became clear that moment of goodbye had not been an ending, but a continuation, a promise that the connection between the royals and the people wasn't fragile. It was alive. A journalist summed it up best in a Sunday column that went viral weeks later. In a world obsessed with breaking news, William and Kate gave us something unbreakable, A reminder that royalty is not about crowns, but about connection. Their wave was more than a gesture. It was a heartbeat shared with millions. That's the legacy of that farewell. Not a grand event written in gold, but a quiet memory etched in hearts. A moment when the royals didn't feel distant, but human. When love felt larger than titles. When a simple wave stopped a nation and reminded the world that kindness still rules. And so, as the video fades, one truth lingers. Moments like this are rare. They remind us that behind every royal wave is a heartbeat. Behind every goodbye is gratitude. And behind every crown is a story of love. Maybe that's why millions couldn't stop watching. Because it wasn't just about William and Kate. It was about us. About every person who's ever said goodbye. Who's ever felt something pure and unspoken. If this moment touched your heart too, don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what you felt watching that farewell. And if you believe that compassion never goes out of style, like this video, share it, and subscribe for more true royal stories that remind us of the beauty in being human. Because sometimes the most powerful goodbyes are the ones that stay with us forever.